All right. So, thanks again for joining. To the first question. How do I know that it's just the words influencing me and keeping me peaceful for a few moments and not me being present? Am I really present? So I think another way to ask this is like, how do I know if I'm really being present or not? And am I just being deceived by some beautiful words versus getting to the truth of things? How we discern anything is based on our individual perceptions, right? Our own discernment, uh, which discernment to me is a very important part of this path in general, whether you're listening to me or following other spiritual teachers or religions or whatever. It's really important to have a strong trust in yourself to be able to decide what you feel is true and what you feel is not, maybe not true completely, or kind of missing the point, or maybe there's bits of ego inside of it. So I'm a big advocate for strengthening your own self-discernment, for trusting yourself and deciding uh, what is working and what is not. With that too, it is really important to constantly pay attention to how you're feeling. So if spiritual words are getting you to a place of peace, but then very quickly, a few moments later, you start to doubt, like, is this even really working? Is this real? What is this? Right? Well, if you're being really present, then be present with the doubt. Because at first there was peace. Maybe because the peace was unfamiliar, it quickly turned into doubt. And so if you're asking, am I present? Being present doesn't always mean being at peace. It's all very often about listening to when we're not in peace. So if you were really present in that moment, you would notice once these thoughts start coming in of like, are these words really that powerful, or am I just in some kind of illusion? Well, if you're really present in that moment, you'll notice there's doubt, there's a bit of confusion, maybe distrust, um, which not only has its own thought, its own questions, and its own mental commentary, but also has a feeling inside it. What is the feeling of doubt? So, in asking, am I present, it really just depends, like, I mean, most importantly, are you present right now? What are you feeling right now? Just because it's not peaceful doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. In fact, if you are presently aware of something that is uncomfortable, that's beautiful. It's actually a moment, it's a beautiful moment because you're addressing something that's happening inside of you uh, with awareness, because the awareness is there to even say that that there's discomfort or confusion. So when asking, am I present? Again, just step back and listen. Who's asking this question? Am I present? Because when you're listening, you are present. There's no need to ask, am I present? You are. In fact, your body is always present. Your physical body, your physical form, your breath, the feelings of your inner body, the stimulus of the five senses, it's always occurring. So these are all portals for being in the present moment. They're always available. But ironically, if you ask the question, am I present? Am I being present right now? That very question could be actually anchored in future or in past. Saying, am I, or was I present? Was I present earlier? Was I present 10 seconds ago? Well, now you're in past. Am I going to be present in an hour when I go to work? Am I going to be present in 5 seconds? Future. Stepping back and saying, I am present now. That's all you need. And if the mind wants to go into the future, then be present with that future thought. Notice it. If the mind wants to very quickly pull you into past, again, be present with that past by noticing it. Because it's any thoughts of past or future can only happen in the present moment as well. So again, if you're noticing these thoughts, then you're bringing presence into the time illusion or dream. So, beautiful question. Most important question, are you present now? Good question. Okay, next. My dreams are so detailed, I don't always catch the symbolism. What are your thoughts on dreams? I do love dreams. I think they're beautiful. Definitely can have a lot of symbolism. Uh, if you're interested in studying them more, your own dreams, I recommend having a dream journal. When you just make the intention of remembering your dreams, and you do this every day, and you just write down little details that you can remember, even if it's something very small. The more you do this regularly, every morning after you wake up, the more it's like somehow it like turns the brain on to recording or something, so you can observe it more. I definitely think there's plenty to learn from the symbolism in our dreams. It can kind of really tell us what's going on in our subconscious or in our deep in our psyche. If there's fears, if there's insecurities, if there's um, challenges, it can be a helpful way to kind of bring light to our blind spots. At the same time, though, it can also very much be mind food. The mind loves to chew on all kinds of things, like a dog chews on a bone. And the concepts of dreams, um, I kind of see in that way too. It's like mind candy. It can be interesting, yet at the same time, all kinds of stories can be strengthened or uh, fueled with the mind candy type of perspectives. So, use it. Part of the beauty of the spiritual practices, though, is that like you get to cultivate your own practice, whatever resonates for you. Experiment with it a little bit, play with it. But yeah, so um, I don't really go into dream interpretation much anymore. I To me, it's like another story. It's just more stories, uh, and I prefer to just be out of all stories. Um, I do have dreams here and there, but a lot of times I don't have dreams anymore, like the mental dreams. Another interesting thing on dreams, and this one's probably a little bit more practical with our everyday life, is rather than just the night dreams, is daydreams, right? When we go into these again stories, but they're visual. You have senses within these dreams, these daydreams, right? It's like you can almost taste and touch and hear and see things in your daydream. Yet it's a complete illusion. Daydreams are not real. Yeah. yet we're almost experiencing as if we're real. It's like we're in like some kind of simulation or something. We're not, but unfortunately, whenever we're in a daydream, we're not in present moment. So it is really important to catch when we get caught off into daydreams, which can also be fear dreams, right? Often too, our minds can go into like worst case scenario stuff. I used to have this a lot, where my mind would play out like worst case scenario things in my head. And then I'd like, okay, if this happens, what would I do? And how would I respond? And where should I stand in the room? And all this blah, 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 blah. Just too much. At the end of the day, I realized it's just too much thinking, too much talking, too much trying to control things for me. So, I, part of listening to ourselves, listening to our emotions, listening to our thoughts is also very much listening to our daydreams, our visual mental places that we get carried away in that are not real. They're dreams. They're these little stories, like little movies just playing in our heads. And to put those down and to be in this movie, so to speak, be in this moment, not in all of those stuff. So another side of the topic of dreams. As far as night dreams, though, if you want to study that, by all means, go for it. Keep a dream journal, explore it, enjoy the symbolism. I love exploring symbolism, not only in my dream world, but also in like everyday life, like when a cardinal flies by, well, maybe look up what does a cardinal represent? And you'll find, my sister loved doing this, you'll find a lot of beautiful like messages coming to you in different ways, different animals and people and things. So have fun with it. Uh, you know, follow your. There's a individual. I think it was from like the 70s and 80s. Edgar Casey. I visited his space in at the beach somewhere, Virginia Beach, I believe I was at. He has like this center there, like metaphysical bookstore and a labyrinth and things. It was pretty cool. I do think there's a lot of like mystery, and it's pretty fun to play around with. Um, but at the same time, I feel my path mainly has been about being in present moment in waking state, in awake state right now, and learning to quiet my mind, which means very much putting down the dreams, the daydreams. Um, so yeah, that's mine. Terry says, things are not going as planned with the live feed. This is okay. We are resilient. I will just go get more tea, stick my head out of the door for a breath of fresh air. Ah. Well done, Terry. You're passing the test. Who knew tests would happen even in the midst of spiritual talks? And then she says, it is most likely just me, lol. Another lesson in dissolving my tech frustrations. A lot of people have tech frustrations or technology ping bodies, honestly. Um, oh, and then she realizes, oh, I have pressed the play button. That's actually a beautiful example, right, of how it all works. It's like oftentimes we get caught up in a bits of resistance, and then the resistance itself stops us from seeing the simple solution. Not that anyone's wrong for this. We've all noticed it though. Like I don't know the other day, I have my phone in my hand and I'm like looking around like, where's my phone? I can't find my phone. And you're getting upset and resisting, not being present, not realizing the phone is in your hand. Yeah, we've all done that in different ways, I'm sure. But it's actually a great example of how when we make our internal world primary, listening to how we feel, choosing peace at all times, even when things aren't going our way, we put down the story, and then all of a sudden, like the solution just becomes obvious to us. Like, oh yeah, I need to do this. Or, oh, I need to do that. Beautiful example. Thanks for sharing. To to the next question. This is from the same questioner. Can you speak of forgiveness? I desire and want to forgive, but I do not feel it. Beautiful. I love the awareness and the honesty of I want to forgive. I can feel it. There's a genuine wanting to forgive, but it's not integrated, or it's not deeply felt, which is honest. I love that honesty. So good. So let's just sit with that for a moment. Maybe everyone here can relate to that in some way, where you want to forgive a certain person in the world, in your personal life, or in the global world, but you just can't find that genuine love as much as you would like to. Your intentions are right, but the feeling of it just isn't quite there. So investigate for yourself where that maybe there's some of that. For me, the main secret to forgiveness, to genuine forgiveness, has to do with understanding and compassion. Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." What did he mean? Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Well, the not knowing what they're doing, anybody that requires forgiveness is operating in the state of not knowing what they're doing. Now, on the surface, the mind might argue and say, "Oh, but they know. Oh, but they did this or they did that," and just craziness, and they knew what they were doing, and on and on. Um, However, yes, maybe conceptually, logically, the individual knew what they were doing. But this knowing that Jesus is talking about goes way deeper than the conceptual knowing. That they do not know what they do is referring to being conscious. Consciousness implies choice, having a choice as to if we play out our conditionings, if we play out our reactivities. Unconsciousness is just blindly following the patterns, blindly just living in a state of blindness, basically, where all of our conditioning just plays out. It's um, very repetitive and even very predictable, because it's like on a repeat cycle of things. And everybody carries a ton of conditioning until they start practicing conscious practice of some sort, and they start noticing and asking questions like, why do I do what I do? Why do I comfortably choose this when this other option is here? On and on and on. We all have this, and until we each have our own moments of like awakening, of stepping back and questioning things, you don't really have much of a choice. There really isn't a free will. And this is how Jesus was able to forgive the people that were operating in insanity and justifying killing him. Whether you believe in the story or think it's metaphorical, either way, it, the symbolism in it is very powerful, in that it was like compassion, understanding. They couldn't do otherwise. Rather than making them wrong, making anyone guilty, uh, which our minds does. Our mind loves that, thrives on that. It thrives on because oftentimes when we're upset about something that needs forgiveness, in our minds, the resentment is completely justified, right? Our logic is saying, like, our hearts being like, I want to forgive, I know it's the right thing to do, but then our mind's like, yeah, but this happened. Yeah, but they did that. And that mixed with this understanding and that understanding and this perspective and that perspective, I don't feel the love. Well, part of forgiveness too is stepping out of that mind, stepping out of, it may seem a bit counterintuitive even to step out of logic. However, it is very important because human logic only can go so far. It's only considering a certain level of capacity of possibilities, whereas the deeper level that steps outside of mind is actually way more intelligent. Um, so that's another piece of forgiveness is stepping out of the mind. It's the mind that doesn't forgive. So when you step out of the mind, forgiveness very often just naturally occurs. When you let go of judgments, of right versus wrong, of them having expectations of how what they were supposed to do versus what they did, or maybe even for ourselves, what we did in the past versus now. Forgiveness is a huge topic, and it's also understanding for ourselves that in our past we could not act beyond our level of consciousness. We couldn't because we just weren't there yet. We weren't at that level of wisdom or that level of self-love or of peace or respect or healing or whatever. We just weren't. And carrying any guilt for that, uh, it's just keeping you in that low level, really. So forgiving is also very connected to forgiving ourselves for everything and anything you've ever done in your past that you're not proud of. The deepest skeletons. Everybody has some stuff, I'm sure, in their past that they're not proud of. So and that's a big part of forgiving too. Really learning to genuinely forgive others. It's incredibly powerful to slow down and before we start trying to forgive everyone else, focus on where we need to forgive ourselves. And venture into that. Venture into how far can we take our own self-forgiveness. If there's feelings of guilt, if there's feelings of resentment, or maybe of wasting time, forgive that. Forgive your past self. Forgiveness also means forgiving life as a whole, or forgiving a higher power, for example. Like when I was searching into this, I had a lot of resentments towards the concept of God. I needed to step back and forgive in my brain, forgive God for letting all this insanity happen in the world. Forgive the present moment, forgive the universe for all the suffering that was happening in my life and in other people's lives. Now, after years of study, I realized there's so much more to that, which is why it happens. That's another whole conversation. But if there's resentments there at all, if there is any lacking of forgiveness and of trust, then we do need to look at that and start working on releasing that heaviness, releasing that anger, that or the guilt or the pain, the emotional pain that's stored up. Another big part of forgiveness is that let's say you're forgiving somebody else who did something unconscious, right? It was obviously insanity that they were operating in. It's obviously what they did was not right, not healthy, not okay. However, and it was insane. However, the non-forgiveness in us is just burning us. It's not hurting them. It's burning us. So it's like, ironically, the karma of not forgiving is also the fact that we can't put down the story. We keep replaying it. We keep recreating our suffering from something that happened so long ago. Yet we're still recreating it in our mental worlds. re-experiencing the whole thing, emotionally especially. So another important part of forgiveness is releasing ourselves from all of that, dropping the very things that are burning us, dropping them. Now the mind says, but if I drop them, then I can't just let that person off the hook. You kidding? After what they did, and on and on and on. And the part of the beauty for me in this is that when I forgive anyone and everyone, I'm free of that story. I'm free of any of the pain that might be involved, the resistance, any of the anger, resentment, judgment, guilt. I'm free of all of that, so all that's left is peace. But then also, I know from my own experience that karma is a reality, that every cause has an effect, and that every choice has a consequence, good or bad. And just because I forgive somebody's insanity does not mean they don't have to deal with the consequences of their very own insanity. If I wish consequences upon them, then I myself am creating more consequences for myself. That's a sneaky thing. When you hear people say stuff like, uh, karma's fill in the blank, that's really feeding the ego. It's feeding this like sense of satisfaction that that person's going to to hurt because of their own insanities. That's not really forgiveness. Real forgiveness is compassion of saying like one, I'm gonna let this go. Genuinely, I'm going to just allow it to have it has happened. It is done. There's no need to repeat it over and over in my head. Okay, it happened, but now it is done. And then maybe, okay, the individual that was operating insanity could not have done otherwise. I recognize that. Maybe give them a chance to have changed in some ways. And yeah, just letting go of all the heaviness, letting go of all that resistance. Which feels immensely good inside ourselves to release that heaviness. But then you can also know with compassion that the person you're forgiving is inevitably anybody who's operating in consciousness, who's doing insane things, is creating a lot of karma, the punishing side of karma, the negative side of karma, because that very level of unconsciousness is going to create more suffering in them, and more suffering in them, and more suffering in them. Anyone that's operated in insanity is guaranteed to be in a lot of suffering from their past and in the present. So whenever I see somebody who's operating in very unconscious states, it's like an instant forgiveness because I see really that they're suffering. Their justifications and their insanities are not who they are. It is a reflection of their suffering. And I genuinely feel for that. Like I do. There's a part of me that's like feels it. The other day I was watching a video um, with Donald Trump was at a basketball game or something, football game, soccer game. I don't remember which. He's one that a lot of people have a hard time forgiving. And maybe a lot of people like him. I don't pick sides with that. However, there was a moment when I was watching it that the crowds were booing, and I could see it in his face. There was pain. There was deep pain inside him, like to the point of like he was at tears. I could feel it. He was in this state of like about to cry. And it was very powerful. Compassion, like love, like, hey man, I don't want you to be hurting. Even though he's created so much, the reason so many people boo him is because he's kind of created that, his ego, his life path has created that bit of karma. Even then, though, I had compassion because I don't want to see anybody in that kind of pain, and that kind of like insecurity and discomfort. So there was compassion there, and we can have that for anyone that challenges us. I mean, we can recognize that they are coming from a place of suffering. It's a very powerful way to bring in genuine forgiveness. Also, when we forgive, this doesn't mean that we don't learn. It doesn't mean should be naive. If somebody, lies to you in a big way and steals something from you, forgiveness doesn't mean being like a pushover and being like, oh yeah, I forgive you, and letting them do it again. That would be our own lesson to learn of, no, there is very much a practice of high quality no. You learn from your lessons. You learn when somebody acts untrustworthy, you learn, and they have to deal with the fact that they messed up that trust. This doesn't mean you don't trust the universe, or that, you don't understand forgiveness or second chances or things. It means that you're honoring yourself. You are allowed to put up boundaries. You're allowed to learn from the past, especially. So it doesn't necessarily, forgiveness doesn't also necessarily mean like becoming getting walked all over. Like, if somebody's, let's say somebody has a drinking problem and they get really violent when they get drunk, and then they abuse their partner when they're drunk, and then the next day they apologize and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me, and it feels genuine, the apology feels genuine, but then they do it again. Well, forgiveness isn't just forgiving them for being crazy and then allowing them to do it over and over again. That in and of itself is a definition of insanity. Doing the same thing expecting different results is the definition of insanity. So it is very important to put up our boundaries, to learn from the past, and to respectfully and with a high quality of non-reaction put up our boundaries. Say, no, you made this mistake. I do forgive you, but I also am not allowing it to happen again. Very important. And everyone has every right to do that. So that's, I suppose another aspect to the topic of forgiveness is like, forgiving doesn't mean becoming weak or naive or easily manipulated or anything like that. It's wisdom. Wisdom is experience. So you do carry your experience, your wisdom with you. And yet at the same time there's this love, this forgiveness, but yet at the same time there's this like sort of streetwise or wisdom that's like um, it's kind of almost hard to explain at this point, but I think you kind of get what I mean. Um, so yeah, forgiveness is a huge topic, a lot to go into there. Um, the lacking of forgiveness also is it's a huge part of our suffering, whether it's forgiving things in our past, in our childhood, with our parents. Parents are often big sources of unhealed or unforgiven stories or pain bodies. Uh, and then also forgiving in the present moment, learning how to walk in forgiveness. When you are in non-reactivity implies forgiveness, right? When things don't feel personal anymore. When somebody cuts you off in traffic, but there's no internal there's no to the situation, and there's no feeling of being threatened or anything. There's no personalness in it. It's just happening. That's forgiveness. And that you take that same non-personal living through life in every detail, and that's very much the enlightened state, is a constant state of forgiveness. You could even say when things go wrong, Can you forgive the wrong that is going? Like, can you allow it to be there and release expectations? Which so much of this is really the internal work of our mind, being aware of how our mind carries the resentment, it carries the judgment, it carries the resistant, thoughts and energy. So yeah, forgiveness is such a beautiful and large topic. So if you're wanting to move more towards the genuine feeling of it, that is beautiful. Even just having the intention of being more real with our spiritual practice, so to speak, rather than just having the right words, but like genuinely feeling these various things, is so beautiful. I think the world would benefit so much if everybody kind of slowed down and did that. Because a lot of people have the right answers mentally, right? Through our spiritual studies, our religious upbringings, or whatever. We have a lot of we know what we're supposed to do conceptually, but then bringing it into the integrating into the everyday, every second of life, it's where it's not easy. It's a practice. And so even I would say forgiveness in and of itself is a practice. So if that's where you're feeling pulled, make that your main priority for this week and for as long as you would like. Forgiveness. That's your spiritual practice. Where can I find forgiveness? Where can I bring in more forgiveness? When I'm driving, when I'm interacting with a partner or a friend or a family member or a child or an animal. The other night, my dog at like 1 o'clock in the morning had to go to the bathroom and then stayed out there for an hour. I had to forgive. 1 o'clock in the morning and he wouldn't come inside. I tried to go get him and he's just running away from me and being silly and thinking we're playing, but I'm like ready to go to bed. But forgive. And I actually felt some anger. There was anger in me because part of me was taking it personally, like, how dare you? And I had to call it out. I had to be like, oh, no, here's anger. Let me not react on this. Let me be with it. Let me take responsibility for it. Let me forgive. Let me forgive this puppy. He doesn't even know what's happening. Let me forgive present moment for challenging me. And even better, thank you, present moment, for challenging me. Yeah, forgiveness is such a good one. It's something I'll probably be talking about forever, for the rest of my life, as I'm doing these talks. It's a big one. And forgiving ourselves. Again, when you're doing these practices, let's say your practice is forgiveness, and and you have a moment, you catch yourself in a moment of non-forgiveness. You're getting really upset with somebody, anger, right, and resentment and pain. Okay, can you step back and then you realize, oh no, I'm supposed to be forgiving, and I'm totally forgot my practice, and then on and on and on, all this like self-critical stuff comes up. Okay, now can you forgive yourself for having not been forgiving? Yeah, it's amazing how it's all like cyclical in its nature. And last thing I will say is the more you practice forgiving yourself, the more naturally you will be able to forgive others, and vice versa. The more you practice forgiving others, the more naturally you will be able to forgive yourself. They're very interwoven. They're very connected. So just keep doing your best and keep calling yourself out when you're in that any state of non-forgiveness. Call it out and to yourself. Say, oh, here's a state of non-forgiveness, um, and forgive it. And that's the practice. That's it. That's the practice. Just keep doing your best. You're already doing awesome. If you're even trying, you're already doing a great job. Okay, I think that concludes today's Q&A. And I'll make sure to put this one in our weekly practices for this week. Pay attention to forgiveness. Where can you find areas for forgiveness? Maybe forgiving corporations, or governments, or individuals, forgiving past, forgiving ourselves, forgiving relationships, all kinds of stuff. So many things to bring up in the topic of forgiveness. So in this moment, ask yourself, is there any room for forgiveness in me? And where would that be? And just sit with that, enjoy that throughout the day today. And breathe. And feel the inner body. And remember that we're just sitting here on this beautiful blue planet floating in the cosmic sea.